Hi, this is Jim Faust and Tom Carmody. Faust Goes to the Movies, and this is part 3 of Marilyn Monroe. And we're starting when she signed her new contract Marilyn
extension.
Monroe Productions on New Year's Eve in 1955. And Milton Green was instrumental, photographer, a friend of hers, in securing that contract, whereby she would have director and cinematographer approval.
Script director,
cinematographer approval for 4 pictures made over the course of 7 years.
7 years, and she got this because of the success of 7-Year Itch.
Of the 7-Year Itch, right? She also did some some sort of what I would consider to be incidental films. They weren't. They were big budget films, but what were we talking about? River of No Return. Where the scenery got more credit than she did.
Yeah.
She didn't really like that.
No Business Like Show Business.
No Business Like Show Business, in which she did her quintessential dance number of Heat Wave, which ruffled a lot of feathers. Yeah. She was fully clothed, but it was her body language that just pretty much put everybody past her.
And her first film after the new contract was
Bus Stop.
Bus Stop.
Bus Stop with Joshua Logan directing. And Joshua Logan was probably the one that got her into the whole... He had been schooled in the Stanislavski method. Mm-hmm. And was probably one of the people that was instrumental in then her going to the Actors Studio in New York when she did that and went and studied with Lee Strasberg for, I think, 18 months or whatever. But that's what prepared her for Bus Stop. That really did.
And you know, it's most amazing that the New York Times basically proclaimed, "Hold on to your chairs, everybody, and get set for a rattling surprise. Marilyn Monroe has finally proved herself as an actress."
Yeah. And unfortunately, the unfortunate part of that is she was never really able to reprise that depth of a character. She got close in The Misfits, but she was so screwed up on drugs and booze by that time that... But it's unfortunate because she was just amazing.
And that was, she really was.
Absolutely amazing.
You know, during this time, wasn't this when she met...
She didn't meet Arthur Miller. That's what you're talking about. She didn't meet... She had met him earlier.
Prior, but this is when they started their relationship.
She was in all of that in New York, and even before that. She was really sort of wound up in that whole salon atmosphere of the 50s. Truman Capote, Arthur Miller, Tennessee Williams. She partied with all of them. And was very outspoken in politics. She was very liberal in her views, and which, of course, that's what would have attracted her to somebody like Arthur Miller. And that was also, this was also the time of HUAC, the House on Un-American Activities, which Miller was called to testify and refused to name names. Mm-hmm. And everybody told Marilyn Monroe to leave him, and she didn't. And they were lucky. They pretty much got through that unscathed. And a lot of people lost their livelihoods and in some cases their lives through that period, but they came through it pretty good. Yeah.
I always love the quote as to what they called them, the egghead and the hourglass.
The egghead and the hourglass, yeah. Yeah.
You know, it was one of the stories that I had read that while they were courting and secretly, they were starting to be followed by the press.
Right.
You know, and shades of Princess Di, that one of the cars following them crashed and a reporter was killed.
Was killed, yeah. And people have always drawn those things, that they were both 36 when they died, and sort of how they had been chased by the paparazzi, both of them. And Marilyn would have been on the cutting edge of all of that.
Absolutely. So from Bus Stop, she went on to a very interesting film. I like it and I don't.
Prince of the Showgirl.
Prince of the Show.
Yeah, and originally that had been, that movie with Laurence Olivier directing it and starring in it had been done for Vivien Leigh. But by this time, Vivien Leigh was too unstable and probably too old to play the role. So Marilyn took over, and it's just kind of a lark.
Yeah.
You know, it's unfortunate because after Bus Stop, you would have thought they could have come up with something that could have showcased her acting abilities a little bit better than this kind of light comedy, which was sort of what she ended up doing then, with the exception of The Misfits, which was very dark drama, that Arthur Miller wrote for her. And when she did The Misfits, she said, well, if this is what he thinks of me, then I'm not for him. And then she went on to do Let's Make Love, which again was just kind of a larkish kind of comedy.
Well, but you skipped a bunch because we got to
Yeah.
go back to, we're actually one of my favorite films that she did was a little bit after a sabbatical. It was Some Like It Hot.
Some Like It Hot, yeah, which the definitive American comedy of the 20th century. And I totally agree with that because every time I see that movie, it cracks me up just like the first time I saw it. She's amazing in that. Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis.
And she
God rest
liked
his soul, who just passed away.
she liked Jack Lemmon and did not like Tony Curtis.
Well, yes and no, because they had an affair in the late 40s when they were both struggling actors. And I think it was kind of a love-hate relationship with them, sort of maybe based on that. But Tony Curtis later on in life, said she was just very difficult to work with because she was so insecure.
Yeah.
And keeping all of them waiting in 100-degree heat in San Diego in heels and full makeup, he and Jack Lemmon, I mean, I can understand completely what that must have been like.
Absolutely. And this is one of the very few major awards, but she got the Golden Globe.
She got the Golden Globe. Yeah.
Best Actress for it, but still not the Academy Award.
No, she never won the Academy Award, and if she should have won for anything, it should have been Bus Stop.
Yeah, no, that's true. But again, she played this role so classically Marilyn. I mean, it was like kind of always reflects of Cary Grant. Cary Grant never won it either, and it's because Cary Grant always played Cary Grant.
Right, and Marilyn Monroe always played
Marilyn Monroe.
You know, and it's also interesting because the people that would talk to her when she was getting ready to do a performance, she always talked about herself in the third person. Monroe wouldn't do this.
Yep.
Monroe wouldn't do that. And how do you live that life where you're essentially almost three different people? So she knew what Marilyn Monroe was all about.
Yeah, that in itself is it is so true. And then, as you said before, her last two movies, Let's Make Love and then The Misfits, which was such a tremendous film and so ironic in so many ways.
In so many ways for all of the people that were in it, not just her, but
right.
Clark Gable, Montgomery Clift, Eli Wallach. It's a movie that sort of, because it is so dark and it is so maudlin, that it sort of gets pushed under the carpet. But it's amazing to see all of them in what ended up being Clark Gable and Marilyn Monroe's last completed movie. And
was after film wrap, Clark Gable died 14 days.
14 days after they wrapped, yeah. And she blamed herself for that, for her tardiness, and she never really got over that either.
You're right. She took a lot of because of her insecurities.
Because of her insecurities and her inability to show up on time and stop popping Nembutal and drinking champagne with Montgomery Clift,
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
It is.
Well, we have now covered the movies in part 5?
Part 4.
Part 4.
Part 4, we will talk about the last year of her life.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks a lot.